Welcome to Live with the Eczema Doc, brought to you by Clean Body, where we believe that you can heal your skin from within by cleaning your body. I'm Dr. Fong, a naturopathic doctor specializing in eczema, and I'm here to guide you through the journey of understanding the root causes of your eczema so that you can finally achieve the clear, healthy skin you deserve. Each week, we combine research-backed insights, science-based strategies, and my years of clinical experience to uncover what's really triggering your eczema and how you can take control for lasting relief. Let's dive into today's episode and uncover the next step to healing your skin from within. Hello, everyone. Today we are talking about how sugar impacts eczema. How do you reduce flare-ups with smart sugar choices? This is such a big deal. What we are eating, what we are putting in our bodies can have a huge impact on inflammation in our bodies. So today we want to specifically talk about sugar of all kinds, and that means added sugar. It means fruits. It means carbohydrates as well, which turn into sugars in your body. And all of these types of sugar can play a role in your eczema. So we've got to break this down today because this is such an important topic for an eczema person, because I typically see that those who have eczema are eating a bit more sugar than they should be eating, and this can play a huge role. So today we are going to talk about sugar and eczema. We are going to talk about the sugars in your diet. We're going to understand why sugar is important for you, but where it can go wrong when you're eating too much of certain types of sugars. We're going to learn how to test for blood sugar, and then we're going to learn about how you kind of apply this in your daily life. How do you reach out to your doctor and maybe get some of this testing, okay? So what is sugar and why is it so important? Well, it is a vital part of our nutrition. Glucose, which is the breakdown of sugar, is important and vital for our brain function. The brain uses about 20% of your body's total energy, and that mostly comes from glucose or sugar. You need energy for your muscles. So during your physical activity, you do have glucose stored in your muscles as glycogen. And then when you are working out, when you're moving your muscles, even when you're just getting up to go get a cup of water, that glycogen is converted back into glucose for energy. And then cellular metabolism, just for our cells to even work, glucose is used in cellular respiration, which is a process that produces ATP, which is the energy currency of our cells. So glucose is needed, sugar is needed, but what happens when we have too much sugar? And why is this bad for eczema? Unfortunately, our standard American diet, which we term as the SAD diet, standard American diet, typically is pretty high in added sugars and, tends to be lower in those natural sugars that we might want to focus on. And this can lead to what's called insulin resistance and metabolic dysfunction. And there was a study published in Liver International that found that adult patients with eczema or atopic dermatitis, which is the most common form of eczema, have a higher risk of developing type 2 diabetes. And this suggests that there is a relation or correlation between eczema and metabolic dysfunction, which is driven by chronic inflammation and insulin resistance. So let's learn a little bit about insulin resistance. How does this occur? Well, first off, typically insulin resistance is happening because of this SAD diet, high carb, low exercise, high stress. This is unfortunately what a lot of us Americans are practicing in our daily lives. And what happens here is those high carbs that you are eating, and as we have depicted in a picture here, if you're watching this, is a hamburger with French fries and a soda. Now, there's so many carbs in this meal, from the soda, which is basically straight sugar, to the bread on the hamburger, to the French fries. There are a lot of carbs. These turn into glucose in the blood, and actually that soda is straight up sugar that you are drinking if you are having a fast food meal like this. And then because of this, we'll have constant high glucose in the blood, this constant high demand for insulin. And then those insulin receptors become resistant. It's just too much sugar in the blood or glucose in the blood. If we aren't exercising, we're also not using a lot of that glucose. And so we are basically allowing this glucose to kind of run rampant in our system. And if we're super highly stressed, our cells actually need more of this glucose. But what's happening is these insulin receptors are becoming resistant. And then you end up with starving cells, a high glucose level in your blood, a high insulin level, and this leads to insulin resistance, okay? And unfortunately, many of us in America have this problem, and even in other countries as well too. But many of us have this problem. If you find that you are overweight, if you're having a difficult time losing weight, if you have low energy levels, if you have inflammation of any kind, insulin resistance can be playing a role here. And that can lead to a type of diabetes called type 2 diabetes. And this is where we get the insulin resistance going on, and your muscles and your cells are unable to use the glucose due to this insulin resistance. And this is different from type 1 diabetes, where you're just not making insulin. Type 2 diabetes is more of a lifestyle and a nutrition problem, typically, where you're getting that insulin resistance. And this is actually something we could reverse. Type 1 diabetes is a little bit different. So we're not really talking about that one because, that can have some other factors involved, including genetics and autoimmune disease, etc. And then, our healthy representation of this is you eat some food and you release insulin, and that glucose goes into the cells and you're able to use it. So that's really what we want. And insulin resistance and high sugar floating around in the blood promotes inflammation. A systematic review and meta-analysis published in Nutrients found that higher dietary sugar intake, particularly from those added sugars, so not necessarily your fruits, which actually fruits usually have sugar, but they also have fiber in them, was significantly associated with increased levels of inflammatory biomarkers, including CRP, which really highlights the role of sugar in promoting inflammation and chronic disease like eczema. But actually, this chronic inflammation can actually have an effect on multiple types of chronic diseases, cardiovascular diseases, neurological disorders, and even cancer. So these are not just for eczema, but this is something we really need to be thinking about. Now, when you're eating a lot of sugar and you have a lot of sugar floating around in the blood, this is not just going to lead to insulin resistance, but it's actually going to affect your gut health as well. And, we talk a lot about this with eczema, is the relation of your gut health to your skin health. And so this is where sugar can actually affect that gut health. Excess sugar disrupts the balance of bacteria in the gut, leading to an overgrowth of harmful bacteria and yeast. And we call this dysbiosis, okay? This dysbiosis can lead to something that we also talk about a lot in eczema, which is leaky gut or intestinal permeability. And this allows these inflammatory compounds to enter the bloodstream and to trigger eczema flare-ups. Okay, so research published in Frontiers in Microbiology suggests that higher sugar intake alters the gut microbiome. This really reduces that microbial diversity and really can be one of those contributing factors to eczema. So we really need to be choosing the right kind of foods. Sugar without the fiber or without protein along with it can really feed dysbiosis. So when we're doing added sugars and we're not really doing, like fruit, which basically is a sugar combined with a fiber, we might be feeding those bugs in the wrong way. And when we tend to eat fiber, this actually feeds our good bacteria, our probiotics, like lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, really feed on the good fibers that we might eat. And then those high sugar foods may feed more of the bad bacteria that might be contributing to the imbalances in our gut. Okay. And then, of course, we know that high sugar diets can contribute to weight gain and obesity, especially those added sugars, okay? Sugary beverages, processed foods. Of course, one of the reasons is we're just getting excess calories when we are eating these non-essential nutrients in sugar, okay? So this is really important because that weight gain and that obesity is another sign of insulin resistance, is another sign of inflammation. So everything here is actually connected. And we're seeing obesity not just in our adults, we're seeing this in our children. And the unfortunate thing here is that it's because we're feeding our kids basically high sugar, high carb diets. And this is also one of the reasons I'm seeing so many pediatric eczema patients as well, is because we are feeding our kids, very high carb meals. And we really need to start thinking about feeding them healthier meals and really starting this at the very beginning of life, okay? So, what is the right amount of sugar and the right types of sugar to consume to support eczema healing? Let's dive into this. So, first of all, if you're having flares, I would recommend no added sugar. Added sugar is not your sugar in your fruits, for example, or your sugar that's kind of naturally occurring in certain vegetables. This is added sugar. You adding sugar to your food. Processed food will often have added sugars. You adding sugar to your tea, to your coffee. I'm talking about those added sugars. Now, according to the American Heart Association, the recommended daily intake of added sugars is no more than 25 grams or 6 teaspoons of added sugar per day. For men, no more than 36 grams or 9 teaspoons of added sugar per day. For me, this is still pretty high. And actually, in the standard American diet, we may even be getting more added sugars than what is listed here. So you definitely want to be below these recommendations by the American Heart Association. But if you have eczema, I would really recommend taking out all added sugars if possible. And our clean food plate at Clean Body really balances your glucose or your carbs or your sweet and starchy carbs with fiber, protein, and fat. And this helps to stabilize the blood sugar. So when you're looking down at your plate, you're never really eating sugar just by itself. You're always stabilizing that sugar with fibers and protein that will basically stabilize your blood sugar so that your blood sugar isn't spiking all over the place. Okay. And so eating your macronutrients in the right order can also be really important. So let's actually break down your macronutrients. What are macronutrients? These are basically the macro part of your diet. So we kind of break those down into like fiber, protein, fats, things like that. So fiber slows down the digestion and absorption of sugar into the bloodstream. And these high fiber foods include things like vegetables, fruits, and legumes. And they help prevent those quick spikes in your blood sugar and in your insulin levels. And the fiber kind of acts like a buffer, allowing the sugar to be absorbed more gradually. So, how do you do this to kind of help stabilize the blood sugar? Well, fruit, which is a naturally occurring sugar, does have some fiber in there, but you can also pair it with even more fiber, like a small handful of chia seeds or nuts, and this can help slow down the release of glucose. So even a fruit by itself often needs a little bit more fiber and a little more protein to balance out the glucose that's in that fruit. Okay. Protein also slows down the digestion of carbohydrates and sugars, and consuming protein rich foods with your meals and snacks can help stabilize that blood sugar as well. And it can reduce those post meal spikes. So, protein also makes you feel more full, so you may actually not eat as much. And an example of this is pairing a piece of fruit with a protein source like almonds or seeds or nut butter. And this can help stabilize the blood sugar more effectively than eating the fruit alone. So, although the fruit already has some fiber in there, stabilizing it even more with more fiber and more protein is a better choice. And sometimes you might be eating a lot of fruit all day long and you're thinking this is really great, really healthy for you. It can be important to actually pair the fruit with some extra fiber and some extra protein, okay? Healthy fats are found in avocados, nuts, seeds, and olive oil, and this slows down digestion and prevents sharp increases in blood sugar. And this can also help regulate the release of sugar into the bloodstream. This can actually give you longer lasting energy. So when you're eating just glucose or sugar by itself, you might notice a spike in your energy, but that's going to fall pretty quickly because you're going to use that sugar very quickly. And if you eat healthy fats, you're going to actually notice that that may give you longer lasting energy and give you more stable blood sugar. So, an example of this would be adding avocado or olive oil to a meal that contains carbohydrates, like if you're eating a salad or whole grains. And this can help moderate the impact of the sugars in those carbohydrates. Or if you're eating popcorn and you put oil on it, that can actually stabilize as well, too. Now, there's a way that you can eat these macronutrients to really help with the stabilization of the blood sugar. There was a study published in Diabetes Care that found that consuming protein and vegetables before carbohydrates led to significantly lower post meal glucose levels compared to eating the carbohydrates first. So, when you look down at your plate, you can start by eating the fiber and the vegetables. This helps slow down the digestive process, helps create a buffer for the sugar absorption, and creates a barrier in the gut, allowing the sugar from the carbohydrates to enter the bloodstream more slowly. Next, you can eat your protein and your healthy fats, and this can further slow down that digestive process. And finally, you're going to finish with your carbohydrates or your sugars. This includes things like your fruits, your grains, your starchy vegetables. And often we're actually eating all of those at the same time. So, my husband will watch me eat and he's like, wow, you really actually eat, your carbs last. And it's just something that I started to do. So I will tend to eat my vegetables and my protein first. And then if I have any carbs on my plate, maybe even some brown rice or anything like that, I'm actually going to eat that last, or starchy vegetables like potatoes, etc. So that's a really great way to eat. Or if you're going to do fruits, you do them after your meal as maybe your post meal dessert. Could be another way that you do that. Okay. So examples of some sugar conscious meals include for breakfast, you can do 1 cup of unsweetened coconut yogurt with a half cup of blueberries, and then sprinkle some chia seeds. I also like hemp seeds on there. So you're kind of stabilizing, the sugar in there, which is the blueberries actually do have some naturally occurring sugar with fat, which is in the coconut yogurt, and also the chia seeds, which have some protein and fiber. And then hemp seeds, if you add that as well. And chia seeds and hemp seeds also are great in omega-3. So you're getting some omega-3s in there as well. For lunch, you might do some greens, some carrots and avocado to get some good fat in there, a protein source like grilled chicken. And then maybe after that salad, you'll have an apple, which has the higher sugar in there. And then your carrots have a little bit of sugar as well too. And then for snack, you might do a banana with maybe some nut butter with some almonds, So these are all options for creating sugar conscious meals. So it's really about looking down at your plate and making sure you're getting a really balanced meal. Okay. Now, how do you test for blood sugar dysregulation to support eczema healing? Well, you can get some tests from your doctor, just a fasting blood glucose test. This measures your blood sugar when you're fasting for at least 8 hours. And we want to see this between 70 and 99. And if it goes above that, you might be in the prediabetes or diabetes range. The hemoglobin A1C test may be a little bit more accurate in terms of the overall picture, since your fasting glucose is only one snapshot in time. The hemoglobin A1C reflects your average blood sugar levels over the past 2 or 3 months, and it's often used to monitor that long-term glucose control. So if I'm dealing with someone who has prediabetes or diabetes, I'm going to be checking this every 3 months or so. So that we can see how that has changed. We want to see that below 5.7. And then if you're between 5.7 and 6.4, you're pre-diabetic. 6.5 or higher, you're in the diabetes range. You may be asked to do oral glucose tolerance test. We actually do this for pregnant women as well, where they actually give you a glucose drink and then they see how you respond to that. So that's another option. Not usually done, though, for general testing. The general tests tend to be the hemoglobin A1C and the glucose. And so sometimes I see that doctors aren't actually even running the hemoglobin A1C. So if you're going to a regular doc, I would make sure that you ask for that. Now, one of my favorites that is more recently accessible to my patients is continuous glucose monitoring. And this is where you're actually going to have a wearable device that tracks your blood sugar in real time. And this is so great because it really does offer you insight into how food, activity, and stress affect glucose. We used to only be able to get this if someone, was on insulin and they would have to get it through their insurance. And now you can actually get this. You can just order this yourself. There's a company called Lingo, and there's a couple other companies that do continuous glucose monitoring. And you can even just do this for only 2 weeks or 4 weeks, just so that you can see how your meals spike your blood sugar, how your exercise lowers your blood sugar, and it's a really great tool to just kind of observe, what your blood sugar is doing. So I do often recommend this for people who have inflammation because even if your blood sugar levels are normal on your blood test, we might actually see that you are having spikes in your blood sugar that are causing inflammation. So when you use a continuous glucose monitor, you want to look for a fasting level in the morning of about 70 to 90. Then you want to check after a meal about 1 to 2 hours. You want that to be below 140. And then your daily average should be lower than 100 throughout the day. So if you're seeing your post meal is spiking really high, one thing I love to do is just go for a walk, have that come down by going for a walk. One of my favorites for, really improving insulin resistance is taking a 10 to 15-minute walk after your meals. This is a great way to lower those blood sugar levels, to really support lowering that insulin resistance and really getting that insulin to start working well again. So if you are having inflammation, if you're having prediabetes, diabetes, walks after meals is one of my favorites. And then, of course, you want to think about what are you actually eating in those meals as well. In my practice, we go a step further. So, your regular doctor might only be running glucose and hemoglobin A1C, and I might run a HOMA-IR, an insulin number. And the HOMA-IR is a calculation derived from your fasting glucose and your fasting insulin. And it really provides a direct estimate of insulin resistance. And a score of less than 1.0 is considered optimal. And then we will also get a fasting insulin with that as well. And we're looking at that in combination with everything else. And so, when you work with a functional practitioner or naturopathic doctor, we might take things a step further. We might ask you to get a continuous glucose monitor. We might ask you to check a HOMA-IR because, we don't want to just give you medication. I personally don't want to just give you supplements either. I want to figure out how do we actually shift the lifestyle and the nutrition to help these blood sugar numbers lower. And the thing with eczema is sometimes we won't even see these blood sugar numbers being abnormal, but we actually are seeing that you are having these blood sugar dysregulation symptoms. And so that's where a continuous glucose monitor can help. And maybe we're just seeing gut issues. And so we actually do have to regulate the sugar. So I would say with eczema, we always have to do something with sugar in the nutrition. And the reasons why might be a little bit different. But I would say sugar, we want to think of sugar as a toxin. We want to see added sugars as a toxin, as a burden on your system, and something that really could be affecting the eczema. Okay. So if you're having eczema, if your little one's having eczema, I really want you to think about the sugars. I want you to think about balancing the sugars in the diet with protein and fat and fiber. I want you to think about taking walks after meals as just baseline things that you can start doing. And then we might need to think about, okay, does the gut need to be treated because you've been having such a high sugar diet for so long? Do your kidneys need to be treated because you have diabetes and that sugar has been disrupting the kidney function? So we might need to think a little further about it. But I would say that with almost every chronic disease, including eczema, we need to think about sugar. Thank you for joining Live with the Eczema Doc. I hope today's episode provided you with valuable insights and tools to support your journey to healing your skin from within. For more information, visit www.cleanbody.health or check the links in the podcast description. You'll find the studies and resources discussed today on my blog. You can also take my free eczema root cause assessment to uncover potential triggers or download my free eczema relief guide for quick, practical tips to calm flare-ups and help with your sleep. If you found this episode helpful, please remember to like, subscribe, and share the podcast to help others on their healing journey. And if you'd like to stay updated with future episodes, please turn on your notifications so you don't miss a thing. Please remember this podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. Always consult with your healthcare provider or book a consultation with me before making any changes to your healthcare regimen. When you clean your body, you heal your skin from within. Thank you again for listening, and I'll see you next week.